Hello, and welcome to Book Circle. This time we continue readings from The View from the Stars, a collection of science fiction short stories by Walter M. Miller, Jr. Blood Bank. The colonel's secretary heard clomping footsteps in the corridor and looked up from her typing. The footstep stopped in the doorway. A pair of jet black eyes bored through her once, then looked away. A tall, thin joker in a space commander's uniform stalked into the reception room, sat in the corner, and folded his hands stiffly in his lap. The secretary arched her brows. It had been 6 months since a visitor had done that, walked in without saying boo to the girl behind the rail. You have an appointment, sir? She asked with a professional smile. The man nodded curtly but said nothing. His eyes flickered toward her briefly, then returned to the wall. She tried to decide whether he was angry or in pain. The black eyes burned with cold fire. She checked the list of appointments. Her smile disappeared, to be replaced by a tight-lipped expression of scorn. Your Space Commander Ali Roki? She asked in an icy tone. Again the curt nod. She gazed at him steadily for several seconds. Colonel Beth will see you in a few minutes. Then her typewriter began clattering with sharp sounds of hate. The man sat quietly, motionlessly. The colonel passed through the reception room once and gave him a brief nod. Two majors came in from the corridor and entered the colonel's office without looking at him. A few moments later, the intercom crackled, "Send Roki in, Della. Bring your pad and come with him." The girl looked at Roki, but he was already on his feet, striding toward the door. Evidently, he came from an unchivalrous planet. He opened the door without looking at her and let her catch it when it started to slam. Chubby, elderly, Colonel Beth sat waiting behind his desk, flanked by the pair of majors. Roki's bearing as he approached and saluted was that of the professional soldier trained from birth for the military. Sit down, Roki. The tall space commander sat at attention and waited, his face expressionless, his eyes coolly upon the colonel's forehead. Beth shuffled some papers on his desk, then spoke slowly. Before we begin, I want you to understand something, Commander. Yes, sir. You are not being tried. This is not a court-martial. There are no charges against you. Is that clear? Yes, sir. The colonel's pale eyes managed to look at Roki's face without showing any contempt. This investigation is for the record and for the public. The incident has already been investigated, as you know, but the people are aroused and we have to make a show of some kind. I understand, sir. Then let's begin. Della, take notes, please. The colonel glanced at the papers before him. Space Commander Roki, will you please tell us in your own words what happened during Patrol Flight 61 on 4-day, 6-month, year 87? There was a brief silence. The girl was staring at the back of Roki's neck as if she longed to attack it with a hatchet. Roki's thin face was a waxen mask as he framed his words. His voice came calm as a bell and clear. The flight was a random patrol. We blasted off Jod 7 at 13 hours, Universal Patrol Time, switched to the high C drive, and penetrated to the 10,000th level of the Seath component. We re-entered the continuum on the outer patrol radius at 36 degrees theta and 200 degrees psi. My navigator threw the dice to select a random course. We were to proceed to a point on the same coordinate shell at 30 theta and 150 psi. We began, the colonel interrupted. Were you aware at the time that your course would intersect that of the Mercy ship? The girl looked up again. Roki failed to wince at the question. I was aware of it, sir. Go on. We proceeded along the randomly selected course until the warp detectors warned us of a ship. When we came in range, I told the engineer to jockey into a parallel course and to lock the automatics to keep us parallel. When that was accomplished, I called the unknown freighter with the standard challenge. You saw its insignia? Yes, sir, the yellow Mercy Star. Go on. Did they answer your challenge? Yes, sir. The reply, decoded, was Mercy Liner Sol G6, departure Sol 3, destination Jod 6, cargo emergency Surgibank supplies, cluster request A4J. Beth nodded and watched Roki with clinical curiosity. You knew about the Jod 6 disaster, that 20,000 casualties were waiting in suspension for those supplies? Yes, sir. I'm sorry they died. Go on with your account. I ordered the navigator to throw the dice again to determine whether or not the freighter should be boarded for random cargo inspection. He threw a 12, the yes number. I called the freighter again, ordered the outer locks opened. It failed to answer or respond in any way. One moment. You explained the reason for boarding. Sol is on the outer rim of the galaxy. It doesn't belong to any cluster system, primitive place, or regressed. They wouldn't understand our ways. I allowed for that, sir, continued the cold-faced Roki. I explained the situation, even read them extracts of our patrol regs. They failed to acknowledge. I thought perhaps they were out of contact, so I had the message repeated to them by blinker. I know they got it because the blinker operator acknowledged the message. Evidently, he carried it to his superiors. Apparently, they told him to ignore us because when we blinked again, he failed to acknowledge. I then attempted to pull alongside and attach to their hull by magnetic grapple. They resisted. Yes, sir. They tried to break away by driving to a higher sea level. Our warp was already at 60,000 Cs. The mass components of our star cluster at that level were just a collapsing gas cloud. Of course, with our automatic trackers, they just dragged us with them, stalled, and plunged the other way. They pulled us down to the quarter sea level. Most of the galaxy was at the red dwarf stage. I suppose they realized then that they couldn't get away from us like that. They came back to a sensible warp and continued on their previous course. And you did what? We warned them by every means of communication at our disposal, read them the standard warning. They acknowledged. Once, sir. They came back to say, this is an emergency shipment. We have orders not to stop. We are continuing on course and will report you to authority upon arrival. Roki paused, eyeing the colonel doubtfully. May I make a personal observation, sir? Beth nodded tolerantly. Go ahead. They wasted more time dodging about in the Seath component than they would have lost if they had allowed us to board them. I regarded this behavior as highly suspicious. Did it occur to you that it might be due to some peculiarity in Sol 3's culture, some stubbornness or resentment at authority? Yes, sir. Did you ask opinions of your crew? A slight frown creased Roki's high forehead. No, sir. Why not? Regulation does not require it, sir. My personal reason, the cultural peculiarities of my planet. The barb struck home. Colonel Beth knew the military culture of Roki's world, Kof 4. Military rank was inherited. On his own planet, Roki was a nobleman and an officer of the War College. He had been taught to rely upon his own decisions and to expect crisp, quick obedience. The colonel frowned at his desk. Let's put it this way. Did you know the opinions of your crew? Yes, sir. They thought that we should abandon the pursuit and allow the freighter to continue. I was forced to confine two of them to the brig for insubordination and attempted mutiny. He stopped and glanced at one of the majors. All due apologies to you, sir. The major flushed. He ranked Roki, but he had been with the patrol as an observer, and despite his higher rank, he was subject to the ship commander's authority while in space. He had also been tossed in the brig. Now he glared at the Kofian space commander without speaking. All right, Commander, when they refused to halt, what did you do? I withdrew to a safe range and fired a warning charge ahead of them. It exploded in full view of their scopes dead ahead. They ignored the warning and tried to flee again. Go on. Roki's shoulders lifted in a suggestion of a shrug. In accordance with Article 30 of the Code, I shot them out of space. The girl made a choking sound. And over 10,000 people died on Joff 6 because. That will do, Della, snapped Colonel Beth. There was a long silence. Roki waited calmly for further questioning. He seemed unaware of the girl's outburst. The colonel's voice came again with a forced softness. You examined the debris of the destroyed vessel? Yes, sir. What did you find? Fragments of quick frozen bone, blood plasma, various bodily organs and tissues in cultured or frozen form, prepared for surgical use in transplanting operations. In other words, a complete stank In other words, a complete stock of surgical supplies, as was anticipated. We gathered up samples, but we had no facilities for preserving what was left. The colonel drummed his fingers. You said anticipated. Then you knew full well the nature of the cargo, and you did not suspect contraband material of any kind? Roki paused. I suspected contraband, Colonel, he said quietly. Beth lifted his eyebrows in surprise. You didn't say that before. I was never asked. Why didn't you say it anyway? I had no proof. Ah, yes, murmured the colonel. The culture of Cove 4 again. Very well. But in examining the debris, you found no evidence of contraband? The colonel's distasteful expression told the room that he knew the answer, but only wanted it on the record. But Roki paused a long time. Finally, he said, No evidence, sir. Why do you hesitate? Because I still suspect an illegality. Without proof, I'm afraid. This time the colonel's personal feelings betrayed him in a snort of disgust. He shuffled his papers for a long time with the major who had accompanied the patrol. Will you confirm Roki's testimony, Major? It is essentially truthful as far as you know? The embarrassed officer glared at Roki in undisguised hatred. For the record, sir, I think the commander behaved disgracefully and insensibly. The results of the stoppage of vitally needed supplies prove I didn't ask for a moral judgment, Beth snapped. I asked you to confirm what he has said here. Were the incidents as he described them? The man swallowed hard. Yes, sir. The colonel nodded. Very well. I'll ask your opinions, gentlemen. Was there an infraction of regulations? Did Commander Roki behave as required by Space Code, or did he not? Yes or no, please. Major Tooley? No direct infraction, sir, but no buts. Major Goen? No infraction, sir. I find myself in agreement. The colonel spoke directly at Della's notepad. The ultimate results of the incident were disastrous indeed, and Roki's action was unfortunate, ill-advised, and not as the 60-star patrol would approve. Laws, codes, regulations are made for men, not men for regulations. Roki observed the letter of the law, but was perhaps forgetful of its spirit. However, no charge can be found against him. This investigating body recommends that he be temporarily grounded without prejudice and given thorough physical and mental examinations before being returned to duty. That brings us to an end, gentlemen. Della, you may go. With another glare at the haughty Kofian, the girl stalked out of the room. Beth leaned back in his chair while the majors saluted and excused themselves. He kept Roki locked in his chair. His eyes kept Roki locked in his chair. When they were alone, Beth said, You have anything to say to me off the record? Roki nodded. I can submit my resignation from the patrol through your office, can't I, sir? Beth smiled coldly. I thought you'd do that, Roki. He opened a desk drawer and brought out a single sheet of paper. I took the liberty of having it prepared for your signature. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not urging you to resign, but we're prepared to accept it if you choose to do so. If you don't like this standard form, you may prepare your own. The Jedi commander took the paper quickly and slashed his name quickly across the bottom. Is this effective immediately, sir? In this case, we can make it so. Thank you, sir. Don't regard it as a favor. The colonel witnessed the signature. The Kofian could not be stung. May I go now? Beth looked up, noting with amusement that Roki, now a civilian, had suddenly dropped the sir, and his eyes were no longer cold. They were angry, hurt, despairing. What makes you Kofians tick anyway? He murmured thoughtfully. Roki stood up. I don't care to discuss it with you, Colonel. I'll be going now. Wait, Roki. Beth frowned ominously to cover whatever he felt. I'm waiting. Up until this incident, I liked you, Roki. In fact, I told the general that you were the most promising young officer in my force. Kind of you, he replied tonelessly. And you could have been sitting at this desk in a few years. You hoped to, I believe. A curt nod and a quick glance at Beth's shoulder insignia. You chose your career, and now you don't have it. I know what it means to you. A tightening of the Kofian's jaw told the colonel that he wanted no sympathy, but Beth continued. Since this is the oldest, most established, most static planet in the cluster, you're out of a job in a place where there's no work. That's none of your business, Colonel, Roki said quietly. According to my culture's ethics, it is my business. Of course, you Kofians think differently, but we're not quite so cold. Now listen, I'm prepared to help you a little, although you're probably too pig-headed to accept. God knows you don't deserve it anyway. Go on. I'm prepared to have a patrol ship take you to any planet in the galaxy. Name it, and we'll take you there. He paused. All right, go ahead and refuse, then get out. Roki's thin face twitched for a moment, then he nodded. I'll accept. Take me to Sol 3. The colonel got his breath again slowly. He reddened and chewed his lip. I did say galaxy, didn't I? I meant, well, you know we can't send a military ship outside the 60-star cluster. Roki waited impassively, his dark eyes measuring the colonel. Why do you want to go there? Personal reasons. Connected with the Mercy ship incident? The investigation is over. Beth pounded his desk. It's crazy, man. Nobody's been to Sol for 1,000 years. No reason to go. Sloppy, decadent place. I never suspected they'd answer Jove 6's plea for surgical supplies. Why not? They were selling them. Of course, but I doubted that Sol still had ships, especially sea-drive ships. Only contribution Sol ever made to the galaxy was to spawn the race of man, if you believe that story. It's way out of contact with any interstellar nation. I just don't get it. Then you restrict your offer, Colonel? Roki's eyes mocked him. Beth sighed. No, no, I said it. I'll do it. But I can't send a patrol ship that far. I'll have to pay your way on a private vessel. We can find some excuse, exploration maybe. Roki's eyes flicked sardonically. Why not send a diplomatic delegation to apologize to Sol for blasting of their Mercy ship? With you aboard? Certainly, they won't know me. Beth just stared at Roki as if he were of a strange species. You'll do it? Urged Roki. I'll think it over. I'll see that you get there if you insist on going. Now get out of here. I've had enough of you, Roki. The Kofian was not offended. He turned on his heel and left the office. The girl looked up from her filing cabinets as he came out. She darted ahead of him and blocked the doorway with her small, tense body. Her face was a white mask of disgust, and she spoke between her teeth. How does it feel to murder 10,000 people and get away with it? She hissed. Roki looked at her face more closely and saw the racial characteristics of Jode 6. The slight oversized irises of her yellow-brown eyes, the thin nose with the flaring nostril, the pointed jaw. Evidently some of her relatives had died in the disaster, and she held him personally responsible. He had destroyed the help that was coming its way to the casualties. How does it feel? She demanded, her voice going higher and her hands clenching into weapons. Would you step aside, please, miss? A quick hand slashed out to rake his cheek with sharp nails. Pain seared his face. He did not move. Two bright stripes of blood appeared from his eye to the corner of his mouth. A drop trickled to the point of his chin and spattered down upon the girl's shoe. On my planet, he said in a not unkindly tone, when someone insists on behaving like an animal, we assist them by having them flogged naked in the public square. I see personal dignity is not so highly prized here. Do you not regard it as a crime to behave like an alley cat? Her breath gushed out of her in a sound of rage, and she tore at the wounds again. Then, when he did nothing but look at her coldly, she fled. Eli Roki, born to the nobility of Koth, dedicated to the service of the 60-star cluster, suddenly found himself something of an outcast. As he strode down the corridor away from Beth's office, he seemed to be walking into a thickening fog of desolation. He had no home now, for he had abdicated his hereditary rights on Kof in order to accept a commission with the patrol. That too was gone, and with it his career. He had known from the moment he pressed the firing stud to blast the Mercy freighter that unless the freighter proved to be a smuggler, his career would be forfeit. He was still morally certain that he had made no mistake. Had the freighter been carrying any other cargo, he would have been disciplined for not blasting it. And if they had had nothing to hide, they would have stopped for inspection. Somewhere among Saul's planets lay the answer to the question, what else was aboard besides the cargo of Mercy? Roki shivered and stiffened his shoulders as he rode homeward in a helicab. If the answer to the question were nothing, then according to the code of his planet, there was only one course left to follow. The Sword of Apology, it was called. He waited in his quarters for the colonel to fulfill his promise. On the following day, Beth called. I've found a Delethian ship, Roki, privately owned. Pilots willing to fly you out of the cluster. It's going to be an observation mission, gathering data on the Sol system. The commissioners vetoed the idea of sending a diplomatic delegation until we try to contact the Solarians by high-sea radio. When do I leave? Be at the spaceport tonight. And good luck, son. I'm sorry all this happened, and I hope, yeah, thanks. Well, the colonel grunted and hung up. Ex-Commander Roki gathered up his uniforms and went looking for a pawn shop. Hock 'em or sell 'em? Asked a bald man behind the counter. Then he peered more closely at Roki's face and paused to glance at a picture on the front of the paper. Oh, he grunted, you want to sell 'em. With a slight sneer, he pulled two bills from his pocket and slapped them on the counter with a contemptuous take it or leave it stare. The clothing was worth at least twice as much. Roki took it after a moment's hesitation. The money just matched the price tag on a sleek, snub-nosed Moulton automatic that lay in the display case. And 300 rounds of ammunition, he said quietly as he pocketed the weapon. The dealer sniffed. It only takes one shot, bub, for what you need to do. Roki thanked him for the advice and took his 300 rounds. He arrived at the spaceport before his pilot and went out to inspect the small Delethian freighter that would bear him to the rim of the galaxy. His face clouded as he saw the pitted hull and the glaze of fusion around the lips of the jet tubes. Some of the ground personnel had left a Geiger counter hanging on the stern to warn wanderers to keep away. Its dial indicator was fluttering in the red. He carried it into the ship. The needle dropped to a safe reading in the control cabin, but there were dangerous spots in the reactor room. Angrily, he went to look over the controls. His irritation grew. The ship, aptly named the Idiot, was of ancient vintage without the standard warning systems or safety devices and with no armament other than its ion guns. The fifth dial of its position indicator was calibrated only to 100,000 Cs and was redlined at 90,000. A modern service ship, on the other hand, could have penetrated to a segment of 5 space where light's velocity was a constant 150,000 Cs and could reach Sol in 2 months. The idiot would need 5 or 6 if it could make the trip at all. Roki doubted it. Under normal circumstances, he would hesitate to use the vessel even within the volume of the 60-star cluster. He thought of protesting to Beth, but realized that the colonel had fulfilled his promise and would do nothing more. Grumbling, he stowed his gear in the cargo hold and settled down in the control room to doze in wait for the pilot. And we'll meet the pilot next time.